Today is a pretty special day here at the Meeting House and at other UU churches, I said churches, all over the Cape and Islands, because our ministers have decided to mix things up a little and have arranged for a pulpit exchange. So our own minister, Reverend Kate Wilkinson, is currently finishing up her sermon in Plymouth, just over the bridge. And that minister, Art, is in Barnstable this morning. And the Barnstable minister, Kristen, is in Brewster this morning. Chatham, Falmouth, and Martha's Vineyard are also involved. And we are lucky enough to have Reverend Jessica Clay here with us this morning from Brewster. Reverend Jessica Clay is the minister of the First Parish Brewster Unitarian Universalist. Prior to that, she was the Hallman ministerial intern at Unity Church Unitarian in St. Paul, Minnesota. She received her master's in divinity from Star King School for the ministry in Berkeley, California. Her first career was an occupational therapist, working across the lifespan to help people achieve independence in daily life activities. She's the proud parent to her two dogs, Rufus and Olive, and loves taking them on adventures throughout the Cape. In her free time, she enjoys baking, going to the theater, and reading young adult fantasy novels. She's also a dear friend of Rev. Kate. Welcome, Reverend Jessica. Now is the time to greet old friends.
Don't try so hard. It comes in a shiver sometimes in a winter window pane, wild with the unseeable frozen there. The shapes above clouds, the score of wind and the words too, the plot of waves and the brain that lays and abandons them. Don't try so hard. Sometimes it falls, a flake at a time, into your life when you are asleep. Sometimes it comes as a winter blankness, waiting for storm or ice or thaw or even wind. And then the air by itself groans, and the trees speak out of themselves. The swamp shudders, and the woods come too. Sometimes it comes when you least expect it, and sometimes it doesn't. Quiet, still, no voice, not even small. No whirlwind, no reply, no burning, just a bare winter bush. The space between stars, where noise goes to die, and the space between atoms, where the charges thin out, these are places too. The moment in the movement of a soul when it all seems to stop, seized up. This is true too. Ice is also. And dormancy. I don't mean the stirring of seeds beneath the snow, but the place between and the moment before. And I don't mean a lightning bolt, but what it passes through. I don't mean a dream, but sleep. After the end and before the beginning is time too. Let it alone. Don't try so hard. This is God too. All of you is. Many of you may remember the morning after the election of 2016. Unfortunately. But the morning after the election of 2016, Cesar Vargas's 74-year-old mother, who is an undocumented worker, walked into the living room and asked him if the results were in. He told her what had happened, And she looked at him and replied with 3 words. She said, "En la lucha." The fight continues. Another translation of this is, the struggle continues. And so here we are 2 years later as the struggle has continued. The struggle to show up in the face of the government shutdown, the struggle to say you have worth to the trans people serving in the military, the struggle to sometimes see God or the face of the divine in the face of another because national fatigue and anxiety have set in. Therefore, people all over the nation go weekly to their religious centers to connect with something outside of themselves, to connect with hope. And what's true is that our spiritual lives do not start and end in our sanctuaries. We take them with us out into the world. Last week, as I marched in the Women's March in Washington, I was connected to something bigger than myself. I was connected to 100,000 people on the streets with me, connected to the people in my congregation who were marching from home, connected to the babies that were being born in that very moment as we took to the streets, born into a world in which marching and resistance are needed, connecting to us all saying, the struggle continues. And as I marched, I reflect on protest as a spiritual practice. Protest as a way of bringing meaning and connection. Protest as a way of inviting in, seeing God in the face of another. Protest as a way of saying, I love this world and these people so much that I'm going to show up for them. I saw the face of the divine in an elderly woman in a wheelchair holding a sign that said, after all these years, I still have to march. I am tired. Protest can be a form of spiritual growth, whatever your form of protest is. And the truth about spiritual growth is that you get to decide how and what that looks like for you. But whatever it is, it should grow and nurture your soul. It should connect you to that still, small voice inside and to the voices and the hearts within our interconnected web. The majority of the time, my spiritual practice is meditation each morning, followed by journaling and poetry. And each year in January, I get to reflect on the past year and how I've done with it, decide if it still works for me in the coming year. Because protest may be a form of spiritual growth for me and a practice of spiritual growth, but those daily spiritual practices are what will sustain me when the call comes to show up. One of our principles as Unitarian Universalists is a commitment to spiritual practice, a commitment to spiritual growth, a commitment to deepening that personal place within each of us that connects to beauty, mystery, transcendence, and for some, the divine. When we commit to our spiritual practices, we're preparing ourselves for what is to come with each day. We're making each day a New Year's Day of sorts. With each morning when we rise out of bed, we have another chance to hit the reset button. Leaving all of what happened the day before behind us, we can move forward resolving to sometimes do things differently, to be more present, more open, and more loving. Some of you might be thinking, well, I come here to this place, to the UU, that's my spiritual practice. But I encourage you to think outside of that. Spiritual practices are those daily things you do that help to connect you to yourself, where you intentionally set aside time to care for that inner part of your soul that no one else sees, to care for that spark of the divine within you that shines so brightly when tended. Each time you make the time to tend to yourself and your spiritual practices, you're preparing yourself for all that life can throw at you. When I was in seminary and I was just about to graduate, heading into my first church position, I had a conversation with a colleague, and I said, "What would you recommend? What can I do to prepare?" I was nervous, very nervous, heading out into the world, and worried I hadn't read enough process theology, expected some sort of a book recommendation. Read this book. All the answers are here. And she replied, "Do your spiritual practices. Make a strong commitment to them. They are what will hold you during the year." And each morning, still to this day when I wake up, there's an argument that occurs in my head between coffee and meditation. Meditation wins the majority of the time, but coffee is quite loud, maybe for some of you. With the sound of the birds chirping in my yard at my feeders, the urge to immediately go watch them with a hot cup of coffee beckons. And one would think after several years of this argument it would be laid to rest, but it continues. And so I tell myself, meditation first, then birds and coffee. Often the things we do each day are done on autopilot: laundry, washing the dishes, and feeding ourselves. But that part of tending our souls can become optional. It becomes the first thing that's thrown off the to-do list when the immediacies of life take over. And tending the soul not only helps us to show up when needed, but it helps us to approach the world from a place of genuine love. In Frederick and Marianne Broussat's book, Spiritual Literacy, they write that Albert Einstein was asked, "What is the most important question in life?" He replies, "Is the universe a friendly place or not?" And Mary Oliver responded to this by saying, "There's only one question: how to love this world." And so all of you beautiful, precious souls gathered here today, how do you love this world? How and what are those daily life practices that help you to do this? Whether we see the world as friendly or not, as we sit in la lucha, in the struggle, every single day we get an opportunity to ask how we are loving this world. For love in itself is an act of resistance, and love of ourselves is the ultimate act. This being January, the month of resolutions. Some of these New Year's resolutions are a path to loving oneself more. And for others, their New Year's resolutions center around losing weight and exercising more. But body-positive activist Sonia Renee Taylor suggests an alternative resolution. She says, "I want people to know they can revise the New Year, New You mantra to say, 'New Year, same me.' And that is more than enough. Our constant endeavor to become new often makes us invisible to us, to all of the ways in which our current selves are magnificent. Our current selves are magnificent. When we commit to our spiritual practices, to those things that sustain us, we're committing to recognizing our magnificence and tending that flame as if our life depends on it. The flame of our soul needs tending, burning so brightly as we leave this sanctuary, but as soon as we step outside the doors, to-do lists beckon. Some of you might be composing them right now. And the flame of our soul, our connection to the divine, it struggles to stay lit. In the grocery store, pumping gas, and protesting. Connecting to the divine in those moments is often the furthest thing from our minds. Stephen Philbrick in his poem this morning says, "Don't try so hard. It comes in a shiver sometimes." This is God, too. All of you is. Don't try so hard. It comes in a shiver. Yet all it takes is turning on the news, and our connection to the divine feels like a far-off thing, a ship that has sailed, a star that has burned out. The Benedictine monk Joan Chittister tells this story of an elder talking to a disciple. "Where shall I look for God?" the disciple asked. "Here," the elder said. "But when will it happen?" said the disciple. "It's happening right now." "Then why don't I experience it?" "Because you do not look." "But what should I look for?" "Nothing, just look." "But at what?" "At anything your eyes alight upon." But the disciple said, "Must I look in a special kind of way?" "No, the ordinary way will do." "But don't I always look in the ordinary way?" "No, you don't," said the elder. "But why ever not?" "Because to look, you must be here. You're mostly somewhere else." This story has replayed over and over again in our lives. When I ask what someone's spiritual practice is, sometimes people will say, "Well, meditation, but I'm not that good at it. I'm always somewhere else." And I just want to say that meditation is not something that one is naturally good at. Like everything else, it requires effort and strengthening. When I was first beginning to meditate, I complained to my spiritual director that I just wasn't good at it. I was too busy planning what I was going to eat, dreaming about that hot cup of coffee. She suggested I do it while brushing my teeth or taking a shower, to tune into myself in those moments and to turn off autopilot. She suggested that seeing the divine in the ordinary can make life extraordinary. All it took was for someone to tell me, "You actually don't have to do this in this prescribed way. You can change it to fit your life," and possibilities opened up before me. Albert Schweitzer says, "Your soul suffers if you live superficially." So as we enter our second month of 2019, I invite you to place nurturing of your soul above other things. Make it a priority, whatever that looks like for you. We live on Cape Cod. We have lots of opportunities to nurture our soul with the beauty that surrounds us. And discover the ways that you are magnificent. Discover and fall in love with yourself and the divine again and again. The easy road is to look at all of the things that we aren't, all of the ways that we could be better, do better. But the difficult but more rewarding practice is to ask how you are loving life. Life with all of its complexities, which is full of reasons not to love it. Yet, in fact, even downright despise it sometimes. Yet the path of resistance is to love it down to the marrow, to love yourself and others down to the marrow, to do those spiritual practices that quiet the cacophony of life, and to see God in the ordinary. All of you souls who came to this place this morning are already on this path. We come to our sanctuaries because this place helps to frame our lives in community, connection, and in amazing grace. And the people sitting next to you in these pews are the perfect people to accompany you on this journey. We are all here for each other in this community, in our congregations, in our wider interconnected web. We're all in this together, growing, nurturing, and resisting. Some of us are struggling to get out of bed. Some of us are struggling for hope. We are the beacons of hope for each other. When we choose to recognize our own magnificence, we are better able to see it reflected in the light of another. We are not alone. We are in this together. With whatever this day, this week, this month may throw at us, by committing to our spiritual practices and to our magnificence, we are preparing ourselves for this journey. We're prepared to protest as a spiritual practice. En la lucha were the 3 words Cesar Vargas's mother stated. En la lucha. The fight continues, and we are all needed, with all of ourselves, all in this together. And each day, we get a chance to restart. Each day as we take that first breath upon waking, we can decide how our morning will go. And each day we have choices with what to eat and do with our bodies and our minds, choices with the words we speak, with the actions we take. What if you committed to seeing your magnificence every day? What if you committed to seeing how you were going to love life today? Even if the day before it felt like the world was telling you something different. We are each needed for what is to come. Every soul in here is so precious and so important. You matter whether you show up at rallies, sign petitions, send postcards, call your representatives, or watch from afar. You matter. Your presence in this place matters, your life matters, and you are what is needed this year. May you find and nurture your own soul as if your life depended on it, because it does. May you choose to love life each day, even when it's impossible. May you share this spark with another when their light has grown dim. Together we will illuminate this world with love, because that is the resistance that is needed now. Amen, and blessed be. So I invite you to settle into your seats. If you have something in your hands, to set them down. Cast your eyes down or close them. Tune into the temperature of the room, the noises around you, what your body is feeling, what your heart is feeling in this moment together. Dear Holy One, God of many names, named and unnamed, great mystery that connects us all this morning. On this morning, we pray for a curiosity of spirit to enter our hearts, for us to be open to the possibilities before us. We pray that our hearts and minds be open to the prophetic voices of our time, to the voices of the marginalized calling on us to rise up. We lift up people who live in the United States who are angry, anxious, and afraid. We pray that they may be reminded of beauty and joy in the midst of all that is occurring in our country. We lift up government workers who have been living in this month of uncertainty and economic instability in this time of government shutdown. As the shutdown is lifted, we pray that they may have resources around them to get grounded and to move forward after this time of uncertainty. We pray for the children and families at the border. May they continue to be reunited, and may we find ways to speak truth to power about what is occurring there. We lift up our siblings of color, our siblings who are trans, our siblings who come from marginalized identities and face microaggressions and aggression on a daily basis. May we continue to do the work of dismantling our own internalized oppressions to work towards our vision of beloved community. We pray for our planet that is hurting and wounded. May we work towards a future which heals it and helps to sustain all of the life living on it. And we turn our prayers towards all that the people in this community are carrying. We pray for those here in this community who are struggling, those who have experienced loss and addiction, We lift up members of this community whose primary spiritual practice is caregiving for loved ones and other members of our interconnected web. We send prayers for members of this community who are lonely, hungry, and in need of support. For those experiencing difficulty with housing or financial issues, we lift up our hearts. Our caring circle extends to hold all of us and the members of the community, named and unnamed, who need our support. Now is the time that we lift up those in our circles who are on our hearts. I invite you to speak the names of those you would like to lift into prayer this morning. You may speak those names now. All of these names uttered from our lips that have strings to our hearts, we hold in this sacred time together. We hold them tenderly. We pray that they may feel held in light and love, feel held by something greater. Know that their connection to us is part of this greater connection of all of us to each other, that we may be held in our worrying, our wondering, and that we may remain open to blessings before us, even amidst the struggle. And for those who entered these doors today who are still finding moments of joy amidst the sadness, we also pray. May they share a bit of their joy with another and know that their joy is welcome in this space. For all of these prayers, we lift up our hearts and our minds. Blessed be, and amen.